It's great to welcome back to the program today Rachel Bitecofer, political strategist and author of the new book, Hit 'em Where It Hurts: How to Save Democracy by Beating Republicans at Their Own Game. So, Rachel, last time you were on, you said something that my audience continually reminds me of and says, you have to get an update from Rachel about this. So let me lay it out for you and we'll pick it up. When we last spoke, I think it was maybe over the summer or so, and I told you I'm looking at the polling nationally. It's concerning me to some degree. You said it's too early. Until Labor Day, people aren't really paying attention. We've got to wait until early in the actual election year, etc. And now, maybe polls are looking marginally better for Joe Biden, but it's not exactly a party that you look at these polls and you say, this looks fantastic for Joe Biden. A lot of the vote is out there, at least theoretically, for third-party candidates who may or may not end up influencing this election, depending on whether they are or aren't on the ballot. I mean, listen, I don't look at it and think this looks awesome. Is it time to worry, I guess, is the question.
Oh, God, no. I mean, you just said it yourself. You said last summer, and I think it was actually a little bit later than that for the book. But anyway, you said last summer, you told me, oh, it's too early. People won't even start to tune into Labor Day. Right now, you're here you are in March. You're like still in this mode that like the campaign's winding down. And I did a show last week. The host started off the same way. And they said, now that we're coming in their intro, now that we're coming into the final stretch of 2004. And I was like, whoa.
Oh, wait a second. Let me clarify. You
Yeah.
said people would pay attention Labor Day. Oh, and we just lost my camera that you see me on, but that's okay. You were saying Labor Day of 23 is when folks really would start paying attention.
No.
Wait, did you
Labor
mean
Day
24?
Yes. For the presidential election?
Right.
Yes. Please, everyone who's hearing my voice, please read my book. It's not
Oh, my
because I want
goodness.
to make sales. I want to make people understand how atypically weird you are if you are David Pakman or Rachel Bitecofer or an audience member of one of us or both. We are not normal human beings, okay? The election, for the intents and purposes of your average voter, will not and has not started yet. It will not start until late summer. It's going to start a little earlier this year because we have both nominees. Both are incumbent, basically, nominees. And we're going to end up having a very long general election. So I think we're going to start to see these effects coming in the summertime. But folks, normal human beings they don't follow any news or politics at all. And the election is definitely not coming down to the stretch for them. It hasn't even gotten on their radar, and it won't for months.
Okay, let me put forward a counterpoint and tell me how you would react. If we look historically at polling in April of an election year and then compare it to what happens in November, it's often pretty accurate. So therefore, wouldn't it be logical to think that what we're seeing in the polling today will reflect November?
I don't know. I mean, in 2016, if you looked at polling from April, and Clinton's going to win in a landslide. So,
okay, so there's a counterpoint.
Yeah, no, listen, guys. I mean, this is coming from well-researched political science knowledge from my PhD. I am here to tell you about 15% of our compatriots watch news.
Okay.
It's actually 38%, but that other half is watching fake news. They're watching Fox News, okay? So about half of the 38% of Americans that still bother to watch any news, about half of them belong to MAGA's cult, okay? And then that leaves about 15% for us. You can't react to what you don't know about. We've been following all 4 years of Biden's administration and Trump's criminal process. No one else has, okay? But Biden has been in the news. Trump has been disappeared in the minds of these tuned out people. And he's only now starting to re-emerge as a thing. And now that camera is turning to him and people are not liking what they see. So the reason that some of us, the people who really, I don't know what's going on with Nate Silver. Nate Silver knows damn well that these early polls aren't predictive. And the reason you guys can tell that for 100% sure is the 538 model is very polls based. That's why it doesn't really predict very far out. It can predict next week well, but not 4 months out. And he can't even put the model out, okay? He can't put the model out till August, guys, okay? Because it's so loud in the polling data. So yes, I understand that people had a very dispiriting 2023, especially within the progressive community, because the grass is always greener on the other side. But now we have almost 100, and we're after tonight going to have $150 million war chest Biden has amassed to take on Trump. Okay. With a new nominee, none of that. They would have
All
spent
right.
$150 million trying to win the nomination, and then it would have divided our base, and people would be mad right now because their guy Buttigieg didn't win, and it was and imagine the black community if Harris didn't win. So we have assets that the average layperson, even the well-informed lay people that listen to this show, aren't able or positioned to understand how important those assets are. And, to answer your question, if we're in August and September and Biden's still down in polling, now keep in mind, you're going to look at all the polling. I'm going to look for likely voters, and I'm going to look for weighting and modeling, because right now we're seeing massive weighting and modeling effects down in the cross-tabular data that's producing crosstabs that kind of defy credulity, especially when you have an election like we had last night or 2 nights ago in Alabama, where we took a swing race in Alabama and won it by like double digits. Okay.
Right.
So it really doesn't, when like me and the polling, like the real polling people, the people who are in AAPOR and have to adhere to really high stringent standards, will tell you, if I crunched a survey when I was a pollster, when I crunched a survey and I weighted it and modeled and did all my shit. Oh, sorry. Can we edit that out?
We'll cut that out. Yes.
Yeah. When I was a pollster, when I weighted and modeled my surveys, the very first thing I looked for were my crosstabs to see, do my crosstabs look weird? Because if they do, that's suggestive that I've weighted and modeled in a way that's distorting the top line data.
So let me just make sure people understand what we mean. There are some polls where you look at the crosstabs and they suggest a 40-point shift in black support for Trump. It doesn't pass the sniff test, and therefore it should make us question the results. That's what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there are some patterns that are so strong in data that you're not, and there's just no way that you're going to see an instant disruption. And we do have a racial realignment going on. It's not a racial realignment. It's actually a education de-alignment. They started with white, non-college educated voters, and now they're grievance politicsing away non-college, everybody who's non-college educated, regardless of race. So the point is this, guys, I'm an expert pollster. I put out a forecast, or not a forecast, but an analysis in December to try to get folks to understand we can't use any of this polling data. It could be right. It could be wrong. It doesn't matter. It's too far out for us to rely on. And then even when we do get into the summer, the work that I'll be doing, with campaigns and clients and myself, I won't be looking at every poll. I'll be looking at good polls that are done with a very likely voter, not registered voters, very likely voters. And I'll be looking for methodological cleanness, right? And at the end of the day, if in September, if Biden's still polling significantly down in battleground states, then you can get concerned. But I don't think you should have any reason to fear. In fact, there's a lot of signs that we're starting to get people, as they're tuning in, we're starting to see Biden's performance increase. So.
All right. So let me ask about a couple specific things. We are seeing a story about cognitive decline that goes both ways, depending on who you talk to. On the one hand, we have Trump making gaffe after gaffe, unable to speak at many rallies, confusing who's president, confusing who Biden defeated last time he ran, confusing which would be the next world war, confusing who was in charge of security on January 6th. Okay, there's all of that stuff. We also have those who say, look at Biden. He looks frail. He looks forgetful. He sometimes stutters. I've interviewed a couple of experts on this. They seem very concerned about what's happening with Trump, and they believe that what Biden is experiencing is sort of like predictable age-related stuff, but not the cognitive decline that's being attached to him by some. Maybe you have an opinion on this, maybe you don't, but from a strategy perspective, is any of this going to be salient with voters as we get closer to November in terms of who believes which candidate is most compromised cognitively?
Yeah, let me be clear with folks. It's not that you came to this opinion that Biden has senility issues on your own. This was part of on what I would do on the other side, which good thing I'm not evil, folks. Because what I would do on the other side is the same thing that they did. Now, going into 2020, you guys might remember such myths as Biden's actually dead. They're just propping him up in the basement. And as soon as he's inaugurated, Kamala Harris is going to take over and you're going to have a female Black president, right?
Yep.
And like they were convinced he'd be dead by June, remember? So like they had kind of built that infrastructure because folks, Biden was old when he ran the first time in 2020. Okay. It's not newly a thing. And what they've been doing since then is flooding the digital space because they're very good at, if you read my book, you'll understand this better. They're very good at setting narratives, and they have done such an effective job on the narrative setting about Biden's mental acumen that going into that State of the Union where he really showed everybody wrong,
Yep.
it was about a 20-point gap. Voters are more likely to describe Biden's brain as flawed than Trump, okay? And so what I've been telling everybody is, look, you've got to get Trump's stuff out there. We have to stop. It's such a flood that our tendency has been to tune it all out and not report and leave in the most outlandish stuff.
Right.
We got to stop that. Because if we want people to know that Donald Trump is a dangerous threat whose brain is mush, we have to tell them. So how much we can, that's a negative that Biden has. It's baked in. They did the work for a year out. We did nothing in response until lately. That's not, I don't think we can whittle away with that much, though I think you're going to start to see the reality of Biden as he's getting covered for campaign stuff, start to, appease some of those concerns. And the State of the Union should have left no doubt as to Joe Biden's competence. But we're going to start to see that, I think, a little bit narrow. But at the end of the day, I think that, it's a classic example of what happens when we sleep and they are busy working hard on narrative setting.
All right. So that's that narrative. Let's now talk a little bit about third party. So there are polls where Robert F. Kennedy is polling 3, and there are polls where Robert F. Kennedy is polling 16. You would know better than I which of these are quality and which are not, and we can deal with that in a moment. Increasingly, there was some question at one point about whether Biden or Trump are more hurt by Robert F. Kennedy. On the one hand, historically a Democrat from a Democratic family. On the other hand, appealing significantly to anti-vaxxers and elements of the right wing. So we didn't know. It's sort of seeming to me like it probably hurts Biden a little bit more than it hurts Trump. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would expect any third party candidate on the ticket who gives a voter an out from voting for Trump that isn't a vote for Biden is bad for us.
Okay. Given that, you look at some polls and you add up the Biden and the Trump part and you get 82, right? So there's 18% that are not there. Sometimes they specifically say, I like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Sometimes they don't. It's not clear at this point which ballots RFK Jr. is going to be on. So in some places, his name may be on the ballot. In other places, it may be, well, I've got to write him in, or maybe I expect him to be there. I show up and his name's not there. So then I pick between Trump and Biden. What are going to be the dynamics of that? And how might we assess the real share of the vote he could come away with?
For me, the third party problem really is just a problem of the swing states. I don't give two hoots about fixing opinion in California. Okay.
Right.
But where it can make a difference is in the margins. And as my first book was on the presidential election of 2016 and quite a bit of diagnostic about the third party defection. It was a clear sign that defection was going to be a big issue because of the Bernie Sanders disaffection. And it absolutely elected Donald Trump the first time in Wisconsin, where traditionally you see about a 1% wasted vote. And that's what I call it, a wasted vote.
Yep.
It was 6% in 2016. So Donald Trump won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, all three of them, just with a plurality. And that's because Clinton couldn't quite match him because she lost so much to that third party bucket, right? So third party voting is never good for Democrats. It's certainly not good this cycle because if we lose, we're talking about an immediate transition into autocracy coming from Donald Trump. So the problems that people have today will seem very quaint in November of 2025, by November of 2025, if Donald Trump wins. So I'm really focused on who's going to be on the ballot and what swing state, and those are where I'd be focusing my energy on.
So now let's talk about the strategy. I continue to think, I talk to Trump people. Our correspondents talk to Trump people. Sometimes you get them to change their minds. You know, Republicans formerly for Donald Trump or whatever are putting out interesting profiles of people who used to support Trump and no longer do. But that seems really like retail strategy. You have to spend hours or days with people to get them to sometimes reconsider. It seems to me easier to find the 40% of the electorate that doesn't vote, focus on the people that are already sort of on our side, and explain to them the importance of getting out to vote. Do you agree that that's a more effective strategy, a better use of time? And how do you motivate those folks to get out and vote and about the importance of voting?
So, David, the hypothetical that you pose, a Trump person, a person that likes Donald Trump, is voting for, Republicans and likes Trump and doesn't see any issues with that there wasn't an insurrection. That person, there'd be zero utility in trying to convince them to vote not for Trump. But there's another part of it, and that's about, if you think of his 60 million votes in 2020, it's about half, maybe 60% of that coalition, maybe 70. But there's another 30% of that Republican coalition that's voting for Trump because of brand loyalty to the Republican brand. And it's a very imagistic, like, loyalty. It's, when I think of Republicans, I think limited government, good on the economy, low taxes. Those are the people there's utility to focus on. And the reason is, as I've alluded once already, to the realignment or de-alignment of non-college educated voters, first whites, and now everybody to the right, as they've been hit with this propaganda grievance strategy, okay? But there's a second realignment as a product of the first. As they did the stuff that did that made people who don't have the education to ward off the effects of propaganda, as they were doing that, it caused a problem in the burbs for them. Smart, college-educated, traditional suburbanite Republicans didn't like it, okay? And you start to see them leave the party really even before Trump, but it escalates quite a bit with him and his nomination. And there's still a lot of those folks out there. So like my work as a strategist is getting campaigns to focus on that bucket and break their brand loyalty, because it's not about selling a candidate or a guy. You have to get them to feel like the brand of voting for Republican is bad and they are embarrassed to do it, right? So there's utility there, but at the same time, as I point out in the book, in which people, it's not just you, lots of people are still like, they're very resistant, like they don't seem to be able to make this pivot. The most important thing in the book is this: no one is like us. No one knows any of the news that you know. They don't have any idea. They know there's a separation of powers. They have nothing else. They know who the president is. They probably maybe know who the governor of their state is. Maybe, definitely nobody else though. Like, it's so hard for us to accept that that is 90% of everybody else. Okay.
Right.
And if we don't accept it, it's a big bad thing, because what we're looking at is, all this stuff has happened with Trump, and yet nobody cares. It doesn't seem to change Americans' mind. You cannot respond to something, a stimulus you never see, okay? And because these folks are never seeing news and information, it becomes beholden to us to go and find the tuned out, right? And especially the tuned out people who are busy enjoying freedom because, they don't know it. They don't know it's at the cost, and it will take time to degrade. But right now, we're the freest Americans that have ever existed, especially if you're not a white male, okay? We have more freedom than we've ever had, but it's also very fresh and on the chopping block of the opposition party. And no one knows that. So like, if we are going to reach out to those non-voters, it isn't because they got suddenly interested in climate policy. No. Okay. No, they're interested in a good time and freedom and not being involved in politics. So you have to convince them that there is a stake, that there is a personal threat heading to them that they should pay attention to, register to vote, and stop.
All right. Dr. Rachel Bitecofer, political strategist, author of the new book, Hit 'em Where It Hurts: How to Save Democracy by Beating Republicans at Their Own Game. Rachel, always appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having me again.